Well, good morning, Hawaii. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joined by Yanji Denise. This is Spotlight Hawaii. Of course, we want to thank all of you for tuning in. And Yanji, we have another great guest here today.
That's right. It's a very exciting day. It's April 19th. That means across the country, anyone above the age of 16 in the United States is eligible to sign up to get a COVID-19 vaccination. To join us to talk about that and all the other news across the state is Governor David Ige, live at his office at the state capitol. Very exciting morning. Good morning, Governor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Yanji and Ryan. It's really great to be given this opportunity again. Yeah, it's a great day. Opening up vaccinations to anyone in the country over age 16, I think is just another important milestone. As you know, we went over a million doses last week, and we still see strong demand. I mean, it's falling off in some of the vaccination sites, but I just think that we have so many more locations where people can go to. I think that that's just, people are getting used to where the easiest facility to get to, but we still see strong demand.
And what are we seeing with this as we roll out and the vaccine is now available to this wide range of this broader category? Have you seen an influx in the signups, and what are you hearing from these vaccination stations and from the Department of Health on the overall signups and scheduled appointments?
Yeah, certainly, Ryan, on Oahu, we still see strong demand, and we had dropped it to 15 above last week. So we are excited about the fact that many in our communities want to get vaccinated. On the neighbor islands, they did see a drop off in some of the vaccination sites, but I do think that part of it is, virtually every pharmacy in the state is now able to provide vaccinations. And as the number of locations that you can get vaccine at goes down, it does create that kind of opportunity for people to shop around and find the easiest location for them.
When we talk about vaccination, of course, the other side of that is getting to herd immunity. The projection and the hope is that we get there sometime in the summer. But there is a concern about this vaccine hesitancy. What's the state doing to make people feel more comfortable, especially with the recent news about Johnson & Johnson? That might give people who are skeptical a little more reason to be skeptical, though we do need to say that it's about 6 people out of close to 7 million. So the risk there is incredibly low. But that said, what are you doing to address vaccine hesitancy?
Yeah, a couple of things, Yanji. And, I do think that from the very beginning, we were focused on broad access and really trying to incorporate many community partners all through the vaccination process. There were over 100 individuals involved with planning out the vaccine distribution, and we had identified and anticipated that there would be some that would be hesitant. So we've been working with community groups. Our community health centers have always been a priority for us from the very beginning. We do know that they reach people who may not have access to healthcare in general, and that was always an important part of our program. And then the Department of Health and Dr. Char always felt that involving all the pharmacies would be important, and they tried to define roles. There are some in our community who can't get to a vaccination site, so they've been making arrangements for someone going to the home to vaccinate, or other arrangements just to make sure that everyone had an opportunity. You may have seen we have started advertising on digital media as well as traditional media, and we are incorporating local residents and community leaders, faith leaders, to help us tell the message and really answer questions. We're not trying to convert someone who doesn't want to get vaccinated to be vaccinated, but we do want to make sure that everyone has their questions answered, especially because we know that the vaccines are safe and they really do make a huge difference in terms of the spread of the virus. And I'm confident that as we answer people's questions and we can respond to their concerns, they'll make a decision that it's in their best interest to get vaccinated.
There has been a lot of talk of the vaccine verification as a point to bypass some of the travel restrictions that are in place with under the current Safe Travels program that is required for people to get a testing or to quarantine. This talk of this vaccine verification process was brought up in our conversation with the Lieutenant Governor last week, who said that he was trying to push for potentially May 1st as an inter-island timeline when people could use their vaccine verification as a way to bypass the Safe Travels program. Could you provide an update on where the state is right now with the overall program and what it's looking like right now?
Yeah, certainly, Ryan. We had a couple of very good meetings with the mayors last week, and we are that close to making an announcement. We'll probably be having a public announcement tomorrow. There's a lot of details about how would we verify. And as you know, we are looking at, I think for the last week, we've averaged 20,000 arrivals per day in the state of Hawaii. And you can imagine trying to set up the people to screen at the airports and as people are moving within the state and trans-Pacific into the state is a huge logistics challenge. And so we want to make sure that we have the systems in place. I think the last time we talked about Common Pass and Clear and the digital platforms. Our contractor on the Safe Travels program is incorporating vaccinations into the program. We're really trying to automate as much as we can. So we would like to verify with the state vaccination database that Ryan Kalesuji actually got the vaccine on the day that he did. And if we can do it electronically, that would really speed a lot of things. So, we realize that it would be a great opportunity for the local economy, especially for intercounty. And we do intend to implement something for intercounty first. And then that gives us more time. It gets a lot more complicated trying to verify vaccinations done in other states. And that's a bigger challenge, but we're going to start with people vaccinated in the state of Hawaii first.
I know you said you're that close, so why not just go ahead and tell us the rest? There are just people who are so eager to find this out, and it does make sense that this would be for people locally. So how would you then, let's say that you did this and you're able to verify that, you used Ryan as an example, got a vaccine because the state has its own database. Would there be then a separate system for visitors from the mainland who then want to travel inter-island? Do they still have to get the test?
Well, we are working with, as I said, Clear and Common Pass, who has, their health platforms. And so they do have access to a lot of data and testing data across the country. They do believe that those same networks would get them access to the vaccination records in many states. One of the challenges is that not every state implemented the vaccine record in the same way. And so there may be some that may be more difficult to verify. But, we're hopeful that if we can start with the state of Hawaii and those vaccinated in the state, and then that gives us additional time to really work to get tied into the national networks that a lot of these companies have established, that we'll be able to roll it out for Trans-Pacific soon.
This topic of transportation and bringing in tourists and verifying in that whole process, when you look as a whole, there seems to be a growing tension between visitors and local residents, with many local residents now, having protests. We saw protests on Maui a few weeks back with people taking back the beach, so they say, in front of these resorts on Maui. How do you balance the need for tourism and some of the concerns from local residents who say tourists aren't wearing masks or not following guidelines, and creating that sort of chasm between these two groups of people, both important, of course, to the overall state, but how do you manage that when we need tourism, but at the same time want to respect what many locals are asking for?
Yeah, I think, Brian, and that's where I really think the Hawaii Tourism Authority is very key. And, the new CEO, John DeFries, actually has a whole program called Malama Hawaii, and just recognizing that, one of the lessons in the pandemic is that, we miss having access to beaches and trails and many other facilities that also attract a lot of visitors. So it is about managing the numbers that we get here. We like to point to the North Shore of Kauai and Hyena State Park, where the flooding from 2018 required us to do a lot of repairs in that area. And as part of that, we implemented a new master plan. We're limiting parking. We've established a cap on the number of visitors who can attend the park. And I think most importantly, we've enhanced the experience. We're working with nonprofits and cultural groups to talk about the lo'is and how they were operated and harvested in the past. And it really, I think, is a glimpse of the balance in visitors and enhancing the experience, and not having to just go for 10 million and 12 million and 15 million. It's really about getting the best 8 or so million visitors who are willing to listen to our mandates, to respect our culture and our environment in a way that allows us to get a win-win situation.
I want to bring in this question from Dave Hall. Ryan, since I'm not logged in, you'll have to pull it up. It's at 10:38. I should ask, how is it fair that weddings can have 100 people to attend, but for other special events like a first year birthday party are not allowed? We're coming up on graduation season. And, do you think there should be modifications? I know that this is an issue that's handled by each county, but let's say for Oahu, obviously 100-person weddings are allowed, but having a baby luau right now is not. So how do you think there should be changes made to the tier system?
Well, I think, Yanji, we're just looking at and just talking with Dr. Char and the public health officials, Dr. Sarah Kemble, who really look at these programs. It's about trying to establish someone who's responsible for how the event is conducted, and really identifying those actions that have to be implemented that can mitigate the spread of the disease. In the case of weddings, it's weddings who are conducted by wedding planners, and they do understand what the parameters are and what the requirements would be, what restrictions have to be in place in order to do it in a safe way. So looking at opportunities and ways for us to do that, we're open. We obviously want people to get back to work in a safe way. But we also know that it has been these kinds of celebrations that really have spread the virus. And I just would like to encourage people to stay patient. I do know that graduations are coming, but remember, every single week that you can defer or delay that celebration means 70 to 90,000 more people are getting vaccinated, and that really does reduce the risk to the entire community.
I want to address schools and where we're at with just looking forward into potentially next fall when schools are resume session once again, calling for in-person learning once again for students to be able to be in the classroom. What do you think that looks like overall? What does a school year maybe going into next year look like? Is it going to require all teachers being vaccinated? Will students have that opportunity to be vaccinated? And what about those types of gatherings with sporting events that happen there, school assemblies? If you can just maybe paint a picture of what you think the school year will look like moving forward.
Ryan, I am encouraged. As you know, there are a couple of trials right now focused on vaccines for younger people. They clearly we're starting at 16 and above. Pfizer has been approved for those 16 to 18. There are a couple of vaccines going to trials right now that they expect to be completed before the end of summer. And so we anticipate that children 12 to 16 should have an approved vaccine. And we do know that and anticipate before the end of the year that vaccines for children age 5 to 12 will probably be approved. So, Ryan, going into the next school year, most of the elementary schools will be back to in-person learning by the end of this school year. We've worked through the mitigation procedures. We've talked about the things that schools need to do to be able to keep students and faculty and staff safe. We did, ahead of the rest of the country, make it a priority for school personnel to get vaccinated. And, the percentage of school-based personnel that chose to get vaccinated is pretty high here in the state. So, we do anticipate that next school year will be more normal than it was in the past. We won't have vaccinations for all students before the end of the year, but many of those who work at a school site will have been afforded the opportunity to get vaccinated. And we do believe that we'll get to herd immunity here in Hawaii. And so that the case counts will stabilize or drop down significantly.
I want to go back to the issue of tourism. There are pretty big, massive budget cut proposals for the Hawaii Tourism Authority. What are your thoughts on whether or not and to what degree this agency should be funded? There was a column this weekend by Lee Cataluna that I read that was basically saying that the HTA is not needed because there's so many tourists coming here already and there's all this pent-up demand. And so why do we even have this agency? Just wanted to get your thoughts on the funding proposals, how it should be funded, and what we need this agency for.
Yeah, Yanji, we talked about it a little bit, right? We want to manage the visitors coming to our islands better. And that's why I believe it's now more important than ever that we fully fund our requests to the legislature for HTA. I agree with Lee to some extent. Yeah, we shouldn't be spending all the money on marketing. What we should be spending tourism dollars are on those kinds of opportunities. Like I said, Hyanna State Parks. We ought to be investing more in state parks to, provide better infrastructure so that we can manage the people better. We need to look at caps on the number of visitors and find better ways to share facilities. I know that John DeFries at HTA has talked about the notion of having some parks and some facilities open to residents only on weekends and visitors only during the weekdays. I think those kinds of proposals and discussions have to happen. We need to find a better way to share Hawaii with visitors, and the HTA funds and the tourist tax is a great opportunity for us to make those kinds of investments, have those discussions, and really find a better way to have the number one industry in our state. And clearly, it creates the most job opportunities here. Be able, if the visitor industry doesn't get back to full strength, then our economy will suffer for a long, long, long time.
We're actually going to be talking to John DeFries and Mike McCartney on Wednesday about this subject, and we can get more in depth on that. But I also want to bring in a question from Paul, who sort of speaks to something that they'll be speaking about. But can you speak about what your administration is doing regarding the state's efforts towards economic diversification away from tourism, as we know that this was something that many lawmakers were talking about during this time of COVID, about finding ways to do this. And we know that it's not just a switch that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. Well, what are some of the things and examples that you can provide that maybe look for ways to move the state less on a less reliant regard on tourism?
Yeah, so I do think a couple of things that I'm excited about, Ryan. What the pandemic did teach us is that it is a global economy now, and that everybody is interacting with more people. I think what it also demonstrates is that, we need to be more self-reliant, and the more self-reliant we can be, the better off we are. So we need to accelerate our transformation to clean, renewable energy. We saw what happens with our environment when people are not driving their cars every day, and we're getting fewer visitors here. So we have to accelerate our commitment to clean renewable energy, and that will create jobs here in our economy. The other thing, Ryan, that you've known for a long time, and you and Yanji are pioneers, right? It's about digital. It's about digital media. There is so many more opportunities. I've been a great fan of film and digital media for all of my legislative career. Those opportunities can exist anywhere. People can live anywhere and do a lot of things. And virtually every company has learned how to do that. So how do we organize our communities? How do we provide training and job opportunities here? Really, that if you have the skills and the right knowledge, you can work for virtually any company anywhere. And every company everywhere has allowed that to happen. So, I think it's about looking at those opportunities, thinking how we can get our university and the public schools to be able to teach the skills that are in demand, and then really helping transition our local companies. We want to accelerate growing more of the food that we eat. We want to be able to embrace the application of technology to virtually every business here in the state, because everyone has been touched by the digital economy.
One of the mechanisms to limit tourism, of course, would be to raise taxes. Ingrid Peterson at 1049 asking, what do you think about raising taxes substantially on tourists in order to lower the number of tourists coming in while increasing the amount each tourist is spending here? That was one of the things that's been discussed for a long time in Hawaii, that we don't necessarily, as you said, want to increase arrivals, but increase the dollars that they're actually spending here. What do you think about raising taxes substantially on tourists that would kind of price out certain tourists from coming here?
Well, I think the challenge is, Yanji, and we've kind of seen it. I really do think that illegal vacation rentals is a challenge in our community, because it really has expanded. When we're managing the number of hotels, indirectly we manage the number of visitors who can come to the islands. When virtually any home can be a hotel room, that really means that there's an unlimited number of tourists who can be here. So I do think that we need to really clamp down on illegal vacation rentals. And Ingrid, I do think that to some extent taxes can discourage, but I think that there's just a better way for us to be proactive. As you said, everybody wants to come to Hawaii. We want to be selective about who we go after and market and try and bring to the islands, because we do want people who are respectful of the norms here. We want people who are respectful of our native Hawaiian culture. And then finally, we do want people who understand that, we're inviting them to be here, and we expect them to not destroy our environment, or to be respectful in our communities in exchange for inviting them to be here.
One of the questions that we've received through this process of COVID is questions about driver's license and renewals, and we know that that process has been included in your proclamations, that you have these emergency proclamations that you have issued, saying that people whose license have been expired can be extended, essentially allowing them to use an expired license. But we are getting reports that people are saying they are having a hard time purchasing items, making flights, because people are saying their licenses are expired. Can you provide a little more clarity on that extension and what people are allowed to do with these expired licenses?
Yeah, Ryan, we definitely, this is a problem all across the country, as COVID has limited face-to-face interactions. Driver's license and IDs have expired all across the country because people couldn't get them renewed. So the proclamation does extend the expiration date. And so I know that many of us still worried. I do know I had personal friends who called frantically last year because their license was expiring, and they couldn't get a reservation. So I just want to let people know that they can continue to use their driver's license beyond the expiration date. they should continue to try and schedule to get it renewed. I do know that there are more and more opportunities here. I know on City and County of Honolulu have created self-servicing kiosks to be able to renew some of these, especially when there's no change to addresses or anything on the driver's license. And so, people need to continue to work to get their their expired licenses renewed, but they should be valid even though they're beyond the expiration date.
Someone private messaged me. They didn't want to write on the message board, but they had a question about people who are undocumented in our community and still want to get the vaccine. If you're undocumented, can you still get the vaccine like everyone else?
Yes, absolutely, Yunji. One of the things, and that's really complicated the vaccine verification process. We've stressed with all of our partners who are administering vaccines that, filling in the paperwork is secondary. If someone wants a vaccine, then we should provide it to them. And so undocumented individuals can go to the vaccination centers and request to get vaccinated.
I want to bring up the emergency proclamation order once more because we know that there's actually a bill moving through the legislature that would in some ways limit a governor's role and ability to issue these proclamations, these emergency proclamations, and the process in which it is done. I wanted to get your take on what you feel that would do to anyone in the governor's role, even because this would exist beyond your term here. But what are your thoughts on limiting the emergency proclamation orders and the power of the governor to make some of these decisions?
Ryan, it's unfortunate that this pandemic has really caused this question to be raised all across the country. I do have weekly calls with governors, and virtually every single legislature has legislation to restrict the governor's authority during emergency situations. And I really think it's not helpful. All of us in executive positions here are trying to make the best decision we can on behalf of the people, and it's impossible to predict what the emergency situation will be and what authority I will need to have. Here in the pandemic, if you were to look at just what we had to deal with here in Hawaii, ordering the 14-day mandatory quarantine for all incoming, if I had to get legislative approval, would have taken weeks, if not months, in order to implement. And we do know that it was a significant part of our emergency response. If you think back to 2018 and the eruption on Hawaii Island, the lava flow was headed toward the geothermal plant. And if I didn't have the authority to take whatever action I needed to be able to secure the geothermal facility, we might have had a huge disaster impacting and killing hundreds, if not thousands. I think you can look at, I haven't found a real instance of a governor anywhere in the country really acting out of scope that would really mean that we should change the laws and place restrictions on governors. I do think that we understand the authority that we have. We take it seriously, and we are always acting on behalf of the public. And, and it's unpredictable to know what an emergency will require.
I know that we are out of time, but Jerry Maltezo says he's late, inter-island travel quarantine free. So we know you have an announcement today, but we'll give you one more opportunity to preview what we can expect tomorrow.
No, I just really wanted to thank you. We are working through vaccines and what that will mean, especially for those residents who are vaccinated here in the islands. And we want to make it easier for people to travel inter-island, and we'll be making an important announcement tomorrow on how to do that and what that timeline would be.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to that, as well as all the other updates that will come with that, I'm sure, as well. So, Governor David Ige, thank you so much for spending your morning with us and starting the week by answering some of our viewer questions.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a reminder to everyone that today is the day that everyone across the country can get a vaccine or can schedule a vaccine, anyone 16 and older. So, go to the Department of Health's website if you need to figure out how to navigate that. And as the governor said, whether you're documented or undocumented, you are eligible to get that vaccine. So the more people who do that, obviously, the closer we get to having herd immunity and all the things that people have been writing that they want to do, having graduation parties and going on the sidelines for sports and what have you. And Ryan, interesting to know that tomorrow, obviously, we're getting a very important announcement. Yeah,
and we're just going to have to wait to hear what that's going to look like. But Governor's saying that they are very close. There's just a few other details that they have to sort through in order to get through the process in which that vaccine verification would allow those people who want to travel to bypass the Safe Travels program through the intercounty at least travel. Him also saying, though, that he is pleased with the way that the rollout of the vaccine is going and continues to move forward, and that there is a high demand, especially here on the island of Oahu, and that he does feel that we will get to a point where herd immunity is something that is possible here in the state of Hawaii, and also laying out what school looks like in the next school year, saying that they are continuing to follow the reports coming out about possible vaccines made available for school children and school age children to some degree, and working to make sure that all those guidelines are followed. But school year is looking a lot more normal going into the next calendar school year.
Yeah, and he also addressed the question that you asked, talking about visitors and the tension that we are seeing between local residents and visitors who may not be comfortable with the influx of people, especially those who may not be wearing a mask. We are going to be talking about that at length tomorrow with John DeFries from the Hawaii Tourism Authority and Mike McCartney from DBED. We'll be talking about, what tourism looks like post-pandemic and how they are trying to manage these crowds. Of course, one thing that Hawaii is so special for is our aloha spirit. And that's why people will come here and they'll pay a higher room rate and they want to continue to be repeat visitors. But if that tension exists, then that dissipates, and that will have a very broad impact on tourism. So we're going to be talking about that with Mike McCartney and John DeFries on Wednesday.
That's right. Looking forward to that conversation. And we want to thank the governor and thank all of you for tuning in this morning and for submitting your questions. We'll see you right back here on Wednesday at 10:30 for another edition of Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.